And the Canadian government is suspending all advertising on Facebook and Instagram. And Phil Perkins is here to explain all the fallout. Phil.
Well, Lindsay, it is the latest counterpunch in this massive fight between the Canadian government and internet juggernauts in Meta and in Google. This all surrounding around the Online News Act. They're supposed to kick in around 6 months from now. Basically, what that's asking is for these companies to pay media companies here in Canada whenever they link stories on their accounts. Well, as of just a couple days ago, Google and Meta saying that they're not just going to post. They're not going to post these links on their websites. And so as of today, the Heritage Minister, Pablo Rodriguez, announcing that the federal government no longer going to be advertising with Meta because they are not up for conversation right now. Google apparently is cooperating a little bit. Now, for more on this, we're joined by Tara Weber, BNN Bloomberg. Let's kind of recap this again. So firstly, for those who might be tuning in just now, what is the Online News Act and how is that supposed to benefit people?
You know, this is really interesting. So essentially, it's a law requiring giants like Meta to make payments to local publishers for using their content on its site. So, you know, this is forcing companies, these big companies like Meta and Google's parent company, Alphabet, to negotiate commercial deals and then pay Canadian news publishers for that content that they're creating. So as you can imagine, these big platforms aren't happy with this. They're arguing that just by posting the content of Canadian news organizations, they're actually getting more eyeballs on that content as it's exposed to a bigger reach, a bigger audience. So as a result, Meta Platforms has said that it would block Canadian news on those websites.
And so as a response to that, it seems like the Canadian government right now is saying at least that starting today, they are pulling their ads on Meta platforms, whether that's Facebook or Instagram. So what is the result of that? Is it really going to hurt Meta that much?
You know, probably not. At the end of the day, they have a huge amount of content to pull from all over the world, but it is going to affect Canadians because it's going to mean less Canadian content, because we know we're at a time where fewer and fewer Canadians are buying their local newspaper or turning into their local news as well. And so what happens if they don't know what's happening within their community? That ends up being the bigger issue. When it comes to these huge conglomerates, no, it doesn't affect them so much. It's more just what it means for us as Canadians. And you know, when it comes to Cogeco and Quebecor pulling this out, and when it comes to their ads, they have some pretty strong words here today. So Quebecor saying in a statement, any move by Meta to circumvent Canadian law, block news for its users, or discriminate against Canadian media content on its platforms through algorithms or otherwise cannot be tolerated. And that's essentially why they say effective immediately. They're pulling all that advertising off of its subsidiaries, business units. And so really, you know, this is something that does affect the Canadian consumer more so than these huge conglomerates.
Right. And so right now it seems like Alphabet, Google, that they are communicating at least a little bit more openly with the federal government. That's why Meta is the one that's kind of getting the brunt of this, with, you know, the Canadian government not spending $10 million a year advertising with them. So we still have 6 months to go before this law is in place. Do you think that in the end there's a happy medium, that everyone's happy, including the Canadian consumer?
Well, this could be a bit of posturing right now. I mean, at the end of the day, this is the first time we've heard from both of these groups coming out, one saying they're pulling all their ads, the other one saying they're blocking Canadian content overall. But we as Canadians have a voice, and at the end of the day, if we're looking for Canadian content, maybe that will drive more consumers back to the Canadian news organizations themselves. But we also know that so many of them are on things such as Facebook, Instagram, and so maybe they're going to be missing out, and it's hoped that many of these consumers will start to realize that they're missing out on local content and maybe start to use their voice a little bit more strongly as well.
All right, Tara Weber, BNN Bloomberg, thanks so much for joining us live here on CP24. We appreciate it. And Lindsay, Minister Rodriguez said that, you know, if this actually does come into place where you can't find Canadian news on Google or on Facebook, he said that the Canadian news consumer will figure it out. They'll find another way. They could just simply go to CP24.com and just get the news straight from us. Something like that. Back to you.
Something like that. A nice plug, Phil. Okay, CP24's Phil Perkins reporting live for us. Thanks.
All right.